I looked at the counter on the smoothie, and I think it's like 4,000 smoothies that I've done.
Oh, wow. Of the same one?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you will you
It's
give us the recipe?
I certainly will. Yeah, it's
All right, son. Thanks so much for being here with me today. First, could you share what your definition of holistic health is? If you had to define holistic health, what does that mean to you?
yeah, definitely. So, in general, I would define it. I mean, holistic is the key, right? It's easy to look at certain things in a vacuum as all interrelated or as not related, and the reality is you can't decouple your mental health from your physical health. Your nutrition from your brain health. There's all these things that are interrelated. We're very complex human beings, and you just can't sum it up by looking at one data point or one aspect. So that's really how I look at it, is the big picture and how everything impacts each other.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so bear with me for a moment while I get this thought out, because this is going to lead the way to quite the discussion, I think. All right, so you experienced quite a lot of trauma throughout your childhood, right? Which you
Sure. Yeah.
credit then for your incredible resilience.
Hmm.
Now, I'm fascinated by the idea that trauma gives rise to resilience, which is a quality that countless highly successful people have in common, right? That said, the quality of resilience doesn't necessarily heal trauma.
No.
And unhealed, or I actually prefer the term unintegrated trauma, can also, in countless ways, keep us from reaching our true potential.
Hmm.
Especially when it comes to feelings of joy and freedom. So I want to dive into this, but first, I think getting your backstory would be really, really helpful for our audience. Do you mind sharing about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot of aspects to trauma that can transform or transmute um, how you are in the world. That can be positive, but there are certainly things that you live with, that I live with every day, that you continue to work on. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that I could tell the story, and a lot of different aspects to the story. But basically, I grew up, my name is Sun because it was a sunny day when I was born, to hippie parents, who were kind of out there. We lived out in Canada, way on a farm, um, pretty much unminded. Had a lot of different experiences, good and bad, because of that. Certainly aspects of neglect, certainly aspects of um, trauma, and accidents and all kinds of things that made me very fearful. Also, a lot of bullying, broken bones, things like that. For whatever reason, I just became a target. Maybe it was starting with my name. Maybe it was, just the way I looked at things, and I stood out. I tend to think that bullies um, self-identify with the people that they're brutalizing, because they're also sensitive and they pick up on it. And they're uncomfortable with their own sensitivity, so they lash out. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but for whatever reason, that went on for many years. And I kind of internalized this deep-rooted feeling of insecurity and of stress, and that drove me to a lot of different things. It drove me to try to excel in sport, and to have, I ended up kind of having OCD personality, and that's really helpful in some things and really harmful in other things. And in sport, growing up in Boulder, Colorado, I worked my way up to an elite level in cycling, but I also pushed myself incredibly hard. Like, I was the most brutal coach to myself that I could ever be. And, I was training 40 to 50 hours a week. didn't even, there's really no notion of self-care. I got very ill, very thin, and eventually had to retire from injury and burnout. And so all of those things then played into how I started to think about health, wellness, and longevity as I pursued a career in software development. And it took me down many paths of self-discovery. The most important ones ended up being incorporated into the app that we created, the platform that we created. But I'll stop there in case you have questions.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Well, I want to hear the story about the broken hands on your bike, because that is just such an example of, and I want to also hear about your self-talk back then, because it's obviously changed a lot since
Yeah.
then.
There was something, I was probably bullied till I was about 14, and something snapped where finally I was like, um, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. And it stopped. And in that, there was some kind of feeling of empowerment. And that transmuted or morphed into this feeling of resilience, um, almost thriving on situations like what happened. So, yeah, the story is basically I was in a mountain bike race and going pretty fast. It was a single track that's basically just a skinny trail. And I was going maybe 25 or a little faster miles per hour. Interestingly, I had this instinct like something was going to happen. And about 5 seconds later, the rim of my front wheel malfunctioned, and basically the wheel stopped dead in its tracks, and I flipped over so violently that my hands were still attached to the handlebars, and my body weight broke both my hands. My face hit the ground. I had two black eyes, and you have kind of have a lot of adrenaline when something like that happens. First thing I did was pull my bike off the trail to make sure that I wouldn't get run over by anybody else. And then, there was this moment where I was like, my race is over. And then I thought, well, what if it's not? Like, what if I could just do this anyway? And suddenly that became so inspiring. I ripped off the tire on the front rim and just rode on the metal with my two broken hands. And as I was riding over the train, I could hear the bones clicking in my hands. It sounds like, crazy, but it was invigorating. And I just kept going, finished the race, went to the medics, and they're like, there's no way you could ride with broken hands. Like, they're fine. You just sprain them, whatever. So then, of course, I had to drive myself to the emergency room, which was like an hour and a half away, get the x-rays. They were broken and deal with that. But, and I've had a lot of things like that happen over my racing career and other things where when the worst thing happens, for some reason, I seem to be at my best, and there's something that is inspiring about it.
Mm.
And I can't really explain how that happened, but it is sort of a part of my nature now.
That's pretty incredible. And were you the self-talk that you had in those kinds of situations? It's like, I think about self-compassion and self-discipline, and I feel like we celebrate self-discipline to such a large degree, sometimes at the detriment of self-compassion. Do you feel like you had self-compassion, or was it just like this extreme drive to reach this new goal of now doing this with this extra challenge of having two broken hands?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I certainly have had a lot of lack of self-care over the years, and that's, I've evolved that, and I understand it, and I do my best to take good care of myself now. I think what happened at the time is the self-talk was just, what if I could do this?
Mm-hmm.
What if I could do this? And being able to rise above was a challenge that excited me. Like, I was literally happy with the challenge to do it. And I'm not really sure where that comes from, but it wasn't necessarily, trying to brutalize myself was more like, hey, I could actually do that. I could pull this off. The curiosity of let me see if I can, sort of changed my mindset. And that's the important part. Like, I could have easily had the mindset of my race is over. I'm not going to ride my bike for months. I'm totally hurt. This is terrible. But instead, it wasn't a like, I'm so tough. It was more just like, well, what if I could overcome this? And suddenly I could, because I had that thought.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's super interesting. And I can it resonates with me in certain ways, because when I was in my 20s and had a really horrible breakup, and I have a lot of trauma in my background as well. And I found my Muay Thai instructor, and he was like, saw my emotional pain. He's like, let me train you. And I said, okay. And back then I didn't know that people use sparring gear. It was like no shin guards. I was, black and blue. If I backed up, he would yell at me. And it was so empowering, that I could keep going and that I could keep doing. And I'm like, I kind of explore, like, where is that coming from? What's that about? Is that a pain derived thing, or more on the positive side of what can I accomplish? So it's just, I think it's fascinating. And I think you explore some of this in the app, which I want to get to. Do you think that we need to push our physical bodies to extreme levels in order to build mental toughness or grit?
And I think that that's one pathway, but in many times it's a negative pathway. So I'm not a proponent of it. Like in the sporting world, millions of athletes literally have burnt out from that mentality, and it's not necessary. Like, it's sort of this sledgehammer approach. Like, let me just beat myself up physically, and somehow there'll be a side effect where I'll be more mentally tough. Well, that's a pretty indirect path to having resilience, and there's probably a better way that's not traumatizing. But it does work, and it also does burn people out and have them be injured and have them be traumatized. So, like, it's double-edged.
Yeah. Okay. So you were around 27 when you got out of the cycling, is that correct? Or the mountain biking? What was next for you?
Yeah. So just out of a coincidence, one of my cycling buddies asked me to do a kind of a software development job, and didn't know how to do it, and just figured it out. Ended up being that I had just a natural ability in it, and basically built a whole career around software development and product management, and made many different types of platforms for different companies. And while I was doing that, I was really trying to unpack what went wrong with my my cycling career, and started to explore a lot of different tools and techniques in science. One of the things that I explored pretty deeply was a quantified self, and I was doing this more than 10 years ago at this point, literally measuring everything every day, looking at my urine, looking at all my body weight and macros and nutrition and heart rate and subjective data. In the end, it turned out that the only data point that really seemed to be correlative to how I felt, at least in training, was the HRV, which turns out to be a really important measure that a lot of people use nowadays. So I put that in my toolkit, and kept searching as I continued to use that as sort of like a hard metric. I went very deep into meditation. Ended up joining Paramahansa Yogananda's group, and really took this ascetic approach where I was meditating 3 to 4 hours a day, and going very deep, and reaching a certain level, where they basically reveal more secrets that you're sworn to never share with anyone, which of course I don't. But in that process,
so don't ask, you're saying.
Yes.
Got it.
But yeah. But in that process, I learned an incredible amount, and appreciated not only that particular practice, but just the benefits of meditation. But I also recognized that that particular approach, meditating, 3 to 4 hours a day, was causing its own stress and really didn't fit into my lifestyle. So that ended up in my toolkit, but I basically took an approach that worked better for me with a lot less time, still incorporating some of the things that I learned. And then the last piece was just being very well aware of the science that was around resilience training without having to beat yourself up. That I was so excited about. I wanted to be the test subject. This was maybe like 6-7 years ago. And I kept waiting for it to come to market and never did. And it's, just so happened that one day I was on the bike trainer working out and I had this epiphany for how it could be done. And I realized that I had all the skills to build it. So that's how the Rewire started.
All right. Well, I'd love us to get into Rewire and kind of go through the different components and elements and talk about not only how it applies to athletes, but also in everyone's daily life as well, because all of these, am I right that they can be applied both to athletes and absolutely in our daily lives?
100%. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we'll dive in deeper to each component, and then I'd love to know a little bit more about your routine now that you're not meditating 3 to 4 hours a day, what you are doing instead.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really three major pillars or components of Rewire. On one end, we're really focused on building mental resilience, and that's directly from the science, using what we would call more of a scalpel approach to building that resilience, where you're not looking for a side effect from pushing yourself physically. You're more finding a direct path to that resilience. It's a specific series of cognitive tasks that you do in the app. So it's like weight training for your mind, if you will. And then on the other side, we focus on a mindset solution, which is 2 to 4 minutes. It's really built around this idea that people have cognitive, emotional, and physical fatigue that goes really unchecked or unmanaged, and we want to provide a solution for helping really be the best you can be every day. And then right in the middle, it's our readiness system, which is designed to be a morning practice. So the idea is that you wake up in the morning, you open up the app. The app, if you're connected with any wearables, it will sync all that information. And then it also assesses you cognitively, physically, and emotionally. So with that understanding, it reflects back your state, how you are emotionally, how you are cognitively, and how you are physically. And then based on what you're trying to achieve, it recommends an intervention, which is this mindset program or the resilience program, depending on how you're doing that day.
Now, how in the world does it measure your emotional state?
Yep. So we basically use a scientifically validated emotional scale. So it's a subjective scale, and it's asking you for simple questions. Questions like, how stressed do you feel today? How frustrated? What's your sense for your readiness to perform? Your level of fatigue. So it's your own perspective on how you're doing. And what's important about that is, let's just say you're reporting that you're a little more frustrated today. Well, that means that you have more emotionality, and that may be a consequence of getting a poor night's sleep or having a lot of stress. And you may not recognize that the reason that you're getting irritated by some little thing is because of all those factors. And once you realize that, then there's something you can do about it, as opposed to just being reactive.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's interesting how sometimes we can not even know if we've gotten a full night's sleep. Like we know if we've woken up a lot, but sometimes I love how that it is connected with other apps. Do you have other apps that you recommend to help this one work better in terms of measuring?
So we built the app and the platform to not require any devices. So
Okay.
if you just have the app, don't worry. We'll ask you the questions to understand your own sense of your sleep. But if you do have either a sleep tracker or a device, we definitely recommend in terms of high quality devices, we connect directly with Aura, which is great. We
Hmm.
connect directly with Garmin as well, and the health apps. So a lot of times you can just sync whatever you're using with your health app, and then that will connect to our system. But you're right; like you don't always know the quality of your sleep. It's one of those, I would say sleep is one of those things you're
Hmm.
unconscious, you
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Your amount of cognitive fatigue, you don't know because you don't have a tool to measure it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Your emotionality, how often do you check in and compare your emotional state from today with prior days? Probably not often. So
Hmm.
all those things we're trying to illuminate for people.
Got it. Okay. So let's say it's telling me I am more emotional. Give me some things that it might have me do to help with this rewire process.
Hmm. Yeah, so let's say that you had a poor night's sleep and the day before you had a lot of stress. Whatever that, obviously, like the body just treats stress as stress. There could be a lot of different types of stress, but your body's stressed out, and and as a result, your mind is under a lot of fatigue. So we're dealing with emotionality, we're dealing with a lack of sleep, and we're dealing with some cognitive fatigue. You'll push a button that says, based on how you're feeling, prepare for your day. And then it'll ask you one more question, which is, do you want to be productive? Do you want to work on recovery? Do you want to work on performance? So let's say you want to work on recovery. So it just means you want to, you know, get through all this stuff that's been built up over the last few days, the lack of sleep, etc. So what we'll do is in a 2 to 4 minute practice, we'll create this, what we call a recipe, where we basically take different protocols from science and from psychology, neuroscience as well. And what we'll do is we'll put them together in one holistic experience. So, for example, in this case, because you're under a lot of stress and you've had a poor night's sleep, we're going to bring you into a breathing modality first, which in this case will be box breathing, which I'm sure you're familiar with. For those listening, if they're not, it's a very interesting breathing technique used by the Navy SEALs, or popularized by the Navy SEALs, which you breathe in for a certain amount and then hold your breath for the same amount of time, and then breathe out for the same amount of time, and then hold your breath at the end for the same amount of time. And what it does is it gets your body into homeostasis, and it puts you into a parasympathetic state, which is a rest and recovery state. So we're telling your body, we're cueing your body, get into a relaxed, calm state. Then you're listening to quote unquote relaxing music. What that actually is meditative music with neuroscience integrated in the form of binaural beats. So this is basically a brain entrainment technique, which what the science shows is it is nearly as effective as meditating, but completely passive. So you're just listening to the music, and what it's doing is creating an entrainment system where your brain starts to mirror what the brainwave that it's perceiving, and that can be a relaxed state or a focused state in broad strokes. So you're breathing, we're helping your physiology. You're listening to the music, we're helping your brain. And then we will take you through some self talk. So, a couple of just phrases that are designed to help you repeat them in your mind. They can be used at any time. We might take you through a visualization. In this case, if you're frustrated, a gratitude visualization can be very helpful. And we'll also do something that I find particularly fascinating, which is subliminal priming. So
Hmm.
you're looking at the screen, and we're priming you with positive imagery, which is actually very specifically people smiling back at you.
Wow.
So, yeah, what's really cool about that is because we're social animals. Like if you think of a herd of deer. If one deer has a fear response, all of the other animals they're all going to pick up on it, and they're going to say we're in an unsafe environment. For humans, we look at each other's faces. And so if I'm smiling back at you, I'm telling your physiology, specifically your vagus nerve, which goes through the muscles of your face, hey, you're in a calm, safe environment. And what that does is it affects your mindset, it affects your cognitive state and your cognitive recovery, and basically tells your deep-rooted biology things are good. And all you have to do is look at the screen. So that's an example of what the experience feels like and what's happening behind the scenes.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love that. I would love to hear now, you've done all this research, you've done this development of this process, this protocols. What about now for you and your life? What is your morning routine? Do you have the same one every morning? I'd love to kind of get a little window into your life and the holistic health and the patterns and the protocols that you've created for yourself.
So, these days I definitely prioritize sleep. So if it means that my day will be a little bit more harder to manage, but I can get more sleep, I'll do it. So I do sleep. I go to sleep very intentionally around the same time and wake up around the same time, because I want the circadian rhythm to really be in a natural cycle, so that I get sleepy at the right time and I wake up naturally at the right time without an alarm. So then when I wake up, I have a rule to not look at anything that would stress me out, whether it be social media or email or anything like that. The first thing I do is I sit down, and once I get out of bed, I'll sit down in the chair in my bedroom, and I will do a readiness assessment using Rewire. And that will incorporate the data from Aura for sleep and all my training data from the day before. And I do a live capture of my heart rate. And so I'm really just looking at, my state and how I feel. And then I do this very abbreviated, it's about a 10-minute mindfulness practice with some gratitude in there, which is, taken from a lot what I learned from Paramahansa Yogananda's group, as well as just things that I've done over my life, to help me, thinking through what's most important, almost like appreciating the gifts that I have, and also thinking through what's important to me today. And when that practice is over, then I'll go downstairs, get my coffee, get started with my day. And then the next thing is I go for a walk with the dogs 7 days a week, always. So
and
after
you have
that,
3 of those.
Yeah. Yes.
What kind of dogs? You're a fellow animal lover. I love that.
Yes. We have they're all rescues, and they all have beagle in them. So they're barkers and they're hunters. And I actually have to walk them 2 sets of dogs, because they can't walk all 3 of them since they outweigh me. So, it's a good 45-minute walk every day.
Nice. Yep. And then you have 4 cats as well, rescues?
I do. Yep, exactly.
Yes. And when do they start meowing for food?
They make sure that I don't oversleep. Let's just put it that way.
There we go.
Yeah.
I figured. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do your walk, and then.
Yep, and then depending on the schedule, so it's either jump right into work, or my preference usually is to do, I work out 7 days a week, so but it's pretty balanced. It'll be usually strength and endurance alternating days. So I'd like to get my blood flowing, like to push my body, like to see that incremental progress. If I have extra time, I'll get in the sauna and do like heat therapy for half an hour, only if I have extra time. But I also have learned to be flexible. Like I have the kind of mind where It's easy for me to get rigid about things. So
Yep.
if, let's just say I only have a half hour and my workout is an hour, then I'll be like, okay, I'll do the first half, I'll do the strength session in the morning, and then I'll do the little cardio session at the very end of the day. Like, it is way better than skipping it because it's not a perfect situation,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. And I'm with you. And I've yeah, worked with a lot of people that are the same. And it's like, okay, I want to do an hour. I've got an hour plan. I only have 20, 30 minutes. Might as well just throw it all out the window, right? Like
Right.
that's the immediate thought. And I think this
Hmm.
is where self-talk and what I like to refer to as self-coaching comes in, to be able to take that step back, observe those thoughts of those all or nothing, and then talk yourself into doing the healthiest thing, which would be to get in what you can. Right.
Exactly.
What is your self-talk like now? How has it changed? And how is there parts of that worked into the rewire of helping people with their own self-talk?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The thing about having a consistent routine is you notice when things are different. So when I'm doing the mindfulness practice in the morning, if I'm having extra trouble focusing, my mind's wandering, or I'm feeling impatient, that's an observation. And that goes into the self-talk later in the day, like, hey, recognize something's a little off today. So as you're approaching things, you might need to be a little more flexible. So that's certainly an aspect of it. You know, I I try to have self-talk that's really around self-care and being okay with not having things perfect,
Mhm.
because that's my thing. I have a perfectionist mindset, recovering perfectionist, if you will. And
Yes, me
so
too.
it's therapeutic for me to let things go because that's not my tendency. So just doing that, just like being okay with it not being perfect, is growth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1000%. 1000%. And you're also vegan.
Hmm.
How did that come to be?
So, for me, it checks all the boxes just in terms of uh, great for the environment, great for ethics, and doing something that feels right for animal welfare, and excellent for health. So, I've actually had a couple of different rounds of veganism, to be 100% honest.
Mhm.
The first time I was younger as a vegan and didn't know how to eat well and got just very sick and had a hard time managing it. And that was purely ethics based. And then later in life, as I approached middle age, I basically doubled down and recommitted. So it's been about 12 years being a vegan in this last round, and very committed and very healthy, and couldn't be happier with the lifestyle.
What did you do not so well the first time around that you've mastered this time around?
I didn't know a lot about nutrition, and not that I think you need to know a lot about nutrition, but you do want to eat a variety of foods. There's so many things that you can do for your health and wellness. Like what I didn't include in my morning routine, which I'm religious about, is my morning immunity smoothie, which have done. I looked at the counter on the smoothie, and I think it's like 4,000 smoothies that I've done.
Oh, wow. Of the same one?
Yep.
Okay. Well, will you
It's
give us the recipe?
I certainly will. Yeah, it is evolved a bit,
Uh-huh.
but it's the base is blueberries, 2 cups of blueberries, frozen wild blueberries every day. That's the highest source of antioxidants, and a quarter teaspoon of matcha, which is the highest herbal source of antioxidants. Then you throw in some turmeric and some ginger,
Mhm.
um, and some dark leafy greens and some coconut water and a banana, and you're good to go.
And how long does that keep you kind of satisfied and energized?
Till lunch. Yeah. And then it's usually like a dark leafy green salad. I throw some protein in there, like seitan or tofu. And then there's a little snack in the middle of the day with another matcha. I'll make like a latte,
Mm.
have a little snack. Yeah, I love that. That's when I do my mindset session, usually around 3, with
Okay.
the matcha. And then, a normal kind of dinner. Our whole family's vegan. So, we'll have like a stir fry or there's so many options these
Yeah.
days. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. But yeah, it's a very balanced diet and very easy to maintain. But it certainly does take time. You're changing your whole lifestyle. So, it's one of those habits that you're doing 3 times a day or more.
Right.
So it's a major change. It's a major change for people to get used to, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so this is probably my most important question yet. What kind of milk do you use in your matcha latte?
Yes, it's definitely oat milk.
Yeah.
Nice, because I do steam it, so I need to have the perfect milk, Oatly milk. Yep.
Yes.
And
All right,
and
just making sure.
I hand stir the matcha powder and all of
All right.
that.
You've got
Yep,
the traditional bamboo. You've
exactly.
got to. Yes.
Yeah, you
Okay.
have to. Yeah, it's a
Yes,
nice little ritual in the afternoon too.
it is. It is. Awesome. I love it. Last question. What do you do now to get into your flow state? I know, you had the athletics, the cycling for a long time. What you've done yoga. What is your most effective methods for getting into flow?
There's a couple of different methods. Some I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you have a lot of skill to back it up.
Okay.
But a great basis for it is having a calm, ready mind. So what that means is you can use a breathing exercise. You could use our solution, which combines a bunch of different things. But you get into this state where you're open to anything. You don't have a lot of expectations, and you bring down your anxiety level to a very low level. So you're basically calm, alert, and aware. And that is a great primer for a flow state, because you're not going to if you're holding onto things tight, there's no way you're going to get into a flow state. How I see flow is it's basically a slowing down of your perception, not a speeding up of your perception.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to be aware of your surroundings and your body locomoting through space, and think through almost as if you're on like those movies where a martial artist jumps up and moves very slowly through the air. It's almost like you have all the time you need to figure out what you need to do. And that can be effective in work and in play and in, of course, in sport. The other technique is using binaural beats to help accelerate that state as well. And then on the extreme end, extreme sports can put you into that state very quickly, because there's a fight or flight response. But again, I don't recommend that because that can also put you into a high level of danger. But I've experienced that a lot over the years.
Absolutely. Amazing. Sun, anything else any final words you'd like to share with the audience and let us know how we can download your app?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would just say it's incredibly powerful to give yourself just 5 minutes of mindfulness or reflection, of calm, of self-care, just 5 minutes. Like whether it's just sit down in a chair outside and take in the sun, do a little breathing exercise. It doesn't have to be complicated, but just stopping the madness for a few minutes and doing that daily can be incredibly powerful. So it doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be a major investment of time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and energy and sharing with us today, Sun.
My pleasure. Yeah, and as it relates to the app, if you do want to check it out, you can search for Rewire Fitness in the app stores. And we do have a free version, so it has a lot of everything that I described for free forever. So check it out.
Fantastic. I have downloaded it myself, and we will put the link in the show notes as well.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.